Hello ladies and gentlemen, I'm Paul TX141 Walsh and welcome to some more Gran Turismo Sport, a racing game developed by Polyphony Digital and published by Sony Interactive Entertainment for the PlayStation 4. Focusing on the game's online mode known as Sport Mode, in this episode I take a look at my performance in the final race of the second stage of the 2019 Manufacturer Series season, which is a Group 3 race held at the Circuit de Barcelona-Catalunya GP layout circuit. With that, let's get racing. Taking a look at the grid then, you'll see that I qualified 7th with a 146.2. My story for qualifying? A disappointing session in that I fell short of my target time by 0.3 of a second, and if I had been able to manage to achieve it, I could have been on pole, if not at least on the front row, which was locked out by the Mercedes and the Porsche in first and second. Now the reason I made a mistake in my fast lap is that I went sideways coming out of the final chicane, turn 15 in particular, as I cut over the curb, and that caused the rear end to jut out, and if I hadn't lifted off the throttle and got the car back under control, I would have been sending it off into the gravel and there would have been no fast lap for me and I would have been well down the order. I was a bit resentful of course because I missed out on pole potentially, but I had to put that aside and focus on the race strategy. Now this is where things got interesting. This was a 9-lap race where a mix of strategies due to the fuel consumption and tyre wear combination, where you could either do this race on a no stop or a one stop. Fuel saving was required, and in my case a light amount of fuel saving because the NSX was good on its fuel consumption, meaning it wouldn't be as big a factor for my car as it would be for the likes of say the V12 Aston Martin Vantage, alternatively say a Ford Mustang or a Ford GT. But still had to do a little bit of fuel saving, so you'll see me upshifting at 7,500 RPM down the start finish straight, going from 4th to 6th gear. Tyre wear however was the critical factor. We all had the choice of using the racing medium or the racing hard compound. Everybody used the grippier medium going into qualifying, and I reckon it was the same going into the race distance, as whilst it was lower in durability, that's where the potential one stop would come in. Now my practice race sessions, I found that the one stop was the faster strategy, i.e. just coming into the pits on lap 4 or 5 in order to put on a fresh set of rubber and then getting out there and hunting down the places you lost with the pit stop and potentially the places further up the field where the no stoppers have continued on. However, qualifying further back made me question whether this was still the best strategy because I'd be potentially caught behind cars and in the middle of a fight. So I decided to just hold back and think, right, make your decision on the strategy as we're getting on to lap number 4, see what everybody in front of you decides to do. 18 car grid here as we're about to get underway with the rolling start. Always been a driver rating, originally 20 of us but 2 individuals pulled out after qualifying, and as we come around the final corner here we will be getting underway in 3, 2, 1. It is go go go, and so tucking into the slipstream of the Alpha 4C in front, we can see that the Lexus behind us from Britain as well has had a very poor start coming out of the first corner, and we've already been able to pull a gap of 1.2 seconds to them as they've been at a distant tow from our car but not enough to put them right onto our backside as we go into the braking zone for turn 1. Now my target here was just simply to hold off of trying to chase the guys in front, get the tyres up to temperature as we went a little bit deep into turn 1 there, but not too much to cause us to go off the track, although we do get a little bit wobbly coming out of turn 2, and that means that the gap between myself and the Lexus behind is going to condense a little bit, but it's going to expand as we come out to turn 3 and going into turn 4 here. Looks like they haven't had the best of X's out at turn 3 compared to myself, and for now it's just pursue the group in front who are all fighting for 3rd right now. You can see it's getting very competitive in front, a lot of pressure being applied to the Mercedes in 3rd place, and it looks as though the leaders in the Mercedes and the Porsche are being allowed to just gradually get up to speed and get away. But the reason I didn't want to get caught too much up in the fight right now is because my tyres are cold and I don't really want to put too much wear through them and get too competitive in the early stages because it could be very risky. Instead just settle into the rhythm because this is a difficult circuit, or at least for me a very difficult circuit, because you get one wheel on any of these curbs and try to turn the steering wheel too hard in the combination of also putting on full throttle and you're going to see the car just spin out. And I was very cagey about touching the curbs, or if I did it'd literally be in the braking zones. Now, coming into the hairpin for the first time of asking here, what you'll see is that the Mitsubishi got a little bit wide, and as a result the Alfa 4C went into them. The concertina effect, unfortunately I couldn't get on the brakes in time to avoid bumping into the back of the Alfa 4C. Fortunately, nobody got hurt as a result of it in terms of their race, and so everybody's able to move on. But looking in our rear view mirror, we can see that the Lexus behind in 8th has definitely closed up now, and that's going to become a little bit of a pressure factor for me coming through the chicane for the first lap. And we see here we get a nice clean run through, almost lose the back end a little bit coming out of turn 14, which costs us some time, but not too much to enable the Lexus to benefit from our mistake, and we're able to follow the Alfa 4C onto the start finish straight, picking up the distant tow from their slipstream zone of 1 to 1.2 seconds. The Lexus behind is now starting to fall back because we are the slightly faster car down the straight, and we're getting that distant tow as well. And coming into the braking zone at turn 1 for the second time, we're just going to focus now on trying to close up to the back of 6th place. Now, one factor to think about right now, and this was going through my head, I started saying to myself, you do realise that if you go for the no stop, you've never practiced it. You do not know what the tyre wear is going to look like when you get to, say, lap 6 onwards. I'd always pitted on lap 5 when doing my practice runs because I always anticipated I'd be able to knock my qualifying laps. So there's a bit of poor preparation by me. But I kept pushing those faults aside, and I thought to myself, yeah, you forget about those faults. Just focus on the race and do your best. You have the faith in the car. You've done 19 races so far, a good number of them in the Group 3 NSX. Just focus on what you can achieve. Trying to put those faults out of my mind. And we can see that whilst we're getting a little bit jagged coming out of turn 5 there, we are pulling the gap once again to the Lexus behind. So it seems as though I'm starting to keep that distance from the Lexus to the point that I'm not having to worry about them potentially making a move unless they go for a serious lunge or a dive bomb, say into the hairpin at turn 10 as an example. Coming through turn 9 then, getting nice and clean through here and getting on the power. We can see that Lexus is 3 tenths behind. I'm starting to lose a little bit of time to the guys in front, but I expect that is going to close up very shortly. The reason being, we can see that a little traffic line of cars, so pretty much from 4th down to 6th is forming. Albeit the guy in 3rd place as well is getting caught up in this fight still. So really it's a fight for 3rd between 4 cars, and then I'm the distant neighbour who's just watching on right now and making sure to maintain pace. And what I was also started to do with this in mind is I was thinking about, right, we need to save the tyres in case we do decide to switch onto the no stop. And how I was going to make that decision, I finally decided coming out of lap 2, it would be do the opposite of what the majority of the guys in front do. So if they all charge into the pits, I'll stay out. If they all stay out, I'll charge into the pits. And that way, that's the decision settled. Do the opposite of what the guys in front do. Quickly switching to the fuel map there to see whether I've got enough fuel. Definitely saving enough at this point in time, and we're just coming down into turn 1 once again. The Alfa looks up the inside of the Mitsubishi, but they can't make it stick. They're too far back, and so they pull back into the slipstream of the Mitsubishi, and we're now getting a much cleaner run out of the corner here, riding on the curb there at turn 2, pulling the nose of the car around, getting it just right on the throttle application to avoid spinning the back wheels up too early. Now coming out to turn 3, we see we get a clean run out of the corner there compared to Lexus behind, and this is where I was very strong. I felt that sector 1 in particular, I was very strong compared to a good number of cars. Sector 2 I wasn't too bad. It was sector 3 where I was having the greatest struggle. What were the lower speed corners there, and my car perhaps getting the back end a little bit jutted out compared to others. And the Alfa 4C in front of me, unfortunately, was a very strong car for sector 3 in particular. It's more of a handling car rather than a speed car. It's much faster there down the straight, but of course it's got the slipstream of the guys in front. In fact, a double tow effectively from 4th and 5th place compared to myself getting the singular tow off the back of their car. So I was never going to catch them on the straight until they lost the tow of the guys in front or they made a major mistake. And we're coming through turn 9 right now, getting it nice, not clipping the apex because otherwise that would cause the rear end to jut out, but getting it right as to not pick up a penalty. And looking at our rear view mirror and the time boards on the left hand side of your screen, you can see the gap to Lexus behind us now expanded to just shy of a second, and that's the advantage we were talking about earlier. Now we're getting settled into that rhythm. I'm starting to keep my distance and really focusing on not getting caught up in this battle in front, but keeping close enough to it in case somebody makes a mistake. Speaking of which, the green Lexus now in 5th dropped a position to the Mitsubishi. Going through turn 10 there, they went a little bit wide into the hairpin. And now all this fight in front immediately makes me think, right, the guys in front are putting too much wear through their tyres and using additional fuel, so it makes life harder for them. Whereas for myself, I'm very comfortable right now, and I'm still keeping both strategies open. As we get a little bit wide, almost going off of the red and white curb there, coming out to the final corner, getting a bit too enthusiastic with the throttle application there. And for reference, if you put all 4 wheels beyond that red and white curb, that was an instant half-second penalty whether you went onto the gravel or not. Got to be wary of that. Lap 4 now, and coming down to the braking zone for turn 1 once again. We get nice and tight to the apex, we follow through nicely in turn 2, shifting up into 3rd gear as we're going into the corner because that helps pull the nose of the car around, using those upshifts to our advantage. And now going through turn 3 here, getting on the throttle as we start to leave the apex behind, and we can see the gap between myself and the Lexus behind is now 1.1 seconds. That security is confirmed unless I make a silly mistake. Let's focus on hunting these guys down now. And I want to get a little bit closer to 6th and 5th because I want to put some pressure on them as the Alfa 4C looks to have made the move, but then going into into turn 4 here. Does the Lexus get back on the inside? They definitely do, and I decided to take a slightly wider line here because what I'm thinking is I can perhaps cut back in with a late apex, but now I think second of it because the guys in front are fighting, but they're not losing enough time yet to come into my clutches, and we can see that I'm holding a half-second gap to them. I'm now used to running in the slipstream, like the dirtier of the guys in front, so I'm feeling really comfortable at this point. And now it's time to keep an eye on what they're going to do, whether they're going to go into the pits, alternatively whether they're going to stay out. The pit stop window has opened, it's lap number 4 out of 9. Coming into the hairpinning at turn 10 again, we can see that the Lexus is really doing a good job to defend against the Alpha going into these corners, taking that inside line, and this is giving me the ability to get right onto the backside of the Alpha and put some additional pressure as they really launch it onto the apex of turn 12 there and really follow closely behind the Lexus. So you can see how strong the Alpha is in terms of being a handling car compared to the Lexus's more all-round nature. As we now come into the chicane to wrap up the lap, turns 14 and 15, bumping over the curbs here, and we can see that the Lexus has pulled into the pits, and a couple of guys have pulled into the pits as we switch over to the replay camera now, and really it's a case of, right, I need to stay out. The Mitsubishi has closed up to the back end of, I believe it was Mercedes for third place, or fourth place, my apologies, and now I'm just going to chase down the Alpha here. No, it's third place. Scratching that, chasing down the Alpha here for now. I expect they're going to probably be staying out for the no stop because they've got the better tyre wear compared to most cars within the category, i.e. Group 3. And as we're chasing them up into turn 3 here on the replay camera, you can see that the guys behind in the Lexus closed up a little bit at this point because we were a bit slow coming through the final sector on lap number 4, what with the fighting in front of us, but it's not enough to put us under threat, and I get the feeling that the guys behind may be pitting shortly because they've been quite aggressive in terms of the rate at which they've been trying to gain onto my back. And the Lexus goes wide there coming out of turn 4, doesn't compromise them too much. You can take a wide exit out of turn 4 and still maintain a good amount of pace going into turn 5. There are a number of different racing lines for these earlier corners in the first sector of the circuit, and then there's the more predetermined racing line as you go into sectors 2 and 3. Wonderful circuit, Catalunya, not my favourite I must admit because of the difficulty in riding on the curbs. They're very dangerous curbs I find. You get stuck on them, alternatively you get black holes sucked into the curbs effectively, and as a result that can compromise your ability to get a good exit, but here we're keeping it nice and clean, not making any mistakes so far. Going down into turn 10, the hairpin once more, we can see the Alpha in front. Now they've got some clean air, they're definitely pulling away from us, and that's what they were waiting for. They just didn't have the pace to be able to get past the Lexus, but as soon as you give them the clear air, they're going to pull away from us. And at this point, I thought to myself, right, if I'm doing the no-stop strategy, I really need to manage these tyres. I need to keep an eye on how that grip is starting to fade away. And albeit on lap 5 right now, that grip factor is not going to be too significant, I am definitely feeling it. And at the time, I was saying to myself, remember, these tyres have got to go to the end. You've never practiced it. Just take it easy. If you have to concede a place because somebody comes charging down the inside, give the place up. Don't overly fight for places right now. Just get the car home. And coming to the end of lap 5, there's another clean lap now onto lap 6, charging down the straight once again. Looking over to our right hand side, we may have some people coming out the pits here as we're coming down into the braking zone for turn 1. We can see a Mercedes that was, I believe, leading the race at some point has actually come out the pits just in front of us, and I decided rather than trying to make a move down the outside of them into turn 1, you know what, I'm just going to let them take the place because they had the positional advantage. I was very far back. I'm not going to try and be aggressive. Just use the slipstream to give me a little bit of speed coming out to turn 3 into the braking zone for turn 4. Just use them as long as I can because they've got the fresher tyres. Now I definitely can't chase them down. Instead, I just need to use them to help me stay away from the Lexus behind me. And it's helped me out a little bit. I've been able to hold some distance from the Lexus, who's feeling a bit of pressure by looks of things from another Mercedes directly behind them. Albeit, keep in mind that some of the guys behind that Lexus have just come out of the pits, and that's where the fear factor of the one-stop came in my mind. In fact, that's a Dodge Viper, that's not a Lexus, my apologies. In that, if you got caught behind somebody on a no-stop when coming out of the pits on the one-stop, you'd lose quite a lot of time if you get caught behind them, say going through Sector 2. And Sector 3, if you couldn't get past them before the hairpin at turn 10 or going into that hairpin, you'd lose a huge amount of time for the rest of the sector. And we can see here the fighting going on behind me, and I'm just happily churning along, churning lap times out and minding my own business as we come into the hairpin at turn 10 once more. So this was a really nice race for me. I know it's not the most entertaining races, but this was one where I had to learn about the car every lap. I had to realise that the no-stop strategy would be a very difficult one compared to what I'd be used to from what I practiced. Now I've got the Dodge Viper behind me who's getting closer and closer. And as we're coming into the final chicane, turns 14 and 15, what I'm thinking is, right, that Viper is getting extremely close as we come through the final chicane. I'm probably going to have to cede the position to them. I'd love to fight for it, I must admit. I should be fighting for it because I'm on a no-stop, but I'd prefer to cede the position to them if they're too close, rather than cause myself the issue of really having to fight them off, because I need to get these tyres to make it to the end. I've said it before and I'll say it again, and that's what was going through my mind, that's why I'm repeating it. Now coming on to lap number 7, going into the braking zone for turn 1 here, we can see that the guy behind is too far back to make a potential move, so for now we're just going to stay on our stand line and not worry too much about them coming up the inside or making some sort of risky move. We can see behind a lot of fightings going on. It looks as though the guys who were chasing us based on the no stoppers have fallen back into the clutches of the one stoppers. We've got that lime green Lexus who pitted in from 5th place, so I remember correctly, coming up behind us now, albeit they're quite far back. They're back in about 10th or 11th right now. And as we go through the corner here, just taking it nice and smooth, going through turn number 4 and then up into corner number 5. What we can see is we're getting those clean lines still, we're not really compromising our entry or exit points, and I'm starting to adjust very cleanly to the fact that I've got a lot of tyre wear in the car now as we're on lap number 7. And at this point I was thinking, right, can't make any mistakes now, just calm down. Not much further to go. The Viper behind is getting incredibly close. They're showing their grille right on my backside. They're not going to be able to make a move into turn 9. It'd be way too risky for them to get alongside into turn 9. But they'll definitely be going for something into turn 10. So I'm going to stay to the outside here. They're in my slipstream. They're following me over and I'm going to stay right in my position. They've even flashed, and to be fair, I respect it. They've flashed to say I'm coming through. But the Mercedes comes charging down the inside into turn 10 here. They go for that lunge and they make it stick. Albeit they make it stick against myself, but the Viper then cuts back on the inside. Bit of a late move there, but to be fair, we've seen late moves before, both on our end, onto the recipient and the person who's done them, and so it's going to count. And then the Porsche gets through as well, and I've lost a couple of places there. Never mind, it is what it is. And now as we're coming into the final chicane, we switch back to the onboard view, drop down to 7th at this point, but we've got 3.5 seconds between ourselves and the guy in 8th, albeit they're gaining very quickly. And as we come through the final corner to complete that, unfortunately I get way too adventurous on the throttle and the dirty air of the Porsche and the guys in front, and that means I go off the circuit onto the gravel. I don't get caught in the gravel, I do it cleanly, but unfortunately, as I said earlier, if you went beyond the red and white curb, coming out that final corner, it was a half-second penalty, compounded by the fact I lost about 0.2 of a second by making that mistake. Now, not too much time gained, but as a result now I've got to take a half-second penalty in the penalty zone on this lap between turns 9 and 10, and that's where the Frenchman in 8th place is really going to catch up to me. So I had a thought at this point, which is, look, it's most likely you're going to start dropping even more places, but you're not going to be able to hold on to 8th position. And I must admit at this point, folks, my mentality actually changed massively in this race, because I started to go a bit deep into turn 4 here, and what I started saying to myself as I'm trying to get the dirt off the tyres and the guy behind is catching so quickly, don't worry about where you come now, just get the car home. If you don't come 10th for Honda because in the end the other Honda drivers beat you, you've done your best. And so for the rest of this race now, I actually started not to lift off per se, but I actually said to myself, you know what, looking at the tyres in the bottom left hand corner of your screen, look how worn the front left is. Are you going to be competitive against somebody who's on a one stop, or somebody who's just better at managing their tyres? Not really. We can probably hold them up in the final sector and initially in sector 1 as we take the penalty there, but just bring the car home. As we cede the place to the Mercedes there coming up from 8th, whereby the penalty pretty much gave them the overspeed to go into the hairpin at turn 10. Now in this final sector, can I hold on to 8th potentially? There's a 2.1 second gap between myself and the chap in 9th, another Brit. But as we can see, we haven't got the ability to get on the throttle as early coming out of turn 12 there. Wonderful corner, and that gap is closing very quickly. And what I was also thinking at this point as well is the fact that if we look at the timings right now, we're one of the few drivers who did go for the no-stop to still be within the top 10 of the grid. We've got the Alpha 4C, but by the looks of things, we're the second best no-stop driver here. So to come home within the top 10 is still an achievement. So coming across the line to begin the final lap, we can see that the chap behind is definitely well in the slipstream zone of my car. I'm not expecting a move going into turn 1 because they're way too far back, but what I'm expecting is a move is probably going to come either into turn 7 if they're very high on the speed compared to myself in the Aston Martin, or alternatively into the standard overtaking point turn 10 hairpin. As we come out to turn 2, you can see how much speed that Aston Martin's got behind. They've got the fresher tyres. They're looking up the inside potentially at turn 3, but they're not going to be able to make it stick as they bump into the back of my car. Just give me a little bump, and then they've got the overspeed, so I decide, right, stay on to the outside as we go into turn 4. No silly moves here, just get on your braking point. Give them the space to do so as I go out on the marbles there, but it's enough to be able to turn myself back in, getting up into third gear now, and just tuck in behind the Aston Martin, use them to pull me along a little bit, and look on the left-hand side of the screen. The gap between myself and the Spaniard in 10th is 5.1 seconds. Is there any need to push any harder? No. So for the rest of this lap, you'll notice it. What I decide to do is I actually drop off from 100% to about 80%. I decide, right, let's not do anything silly as we almost go extremely deep into turn 7 and send the car off the circuit. And that's precisely the thing. This tyre wear now is at a point where it's an unknown for me, and so mistakes are going to become more commonplace. And I think the first thing that triggered it was going wide at turn 16 on lap number 7. But still, holding on to 9th right now as another individual drops out the race further down the grid by the looks of things, so I didn't inherit a position through that. Coming into the hairpin turn 10, Got a clean track ahead of us, the Aston Martin is pulling off into the distance now, 2 seconds up the road. Only a couple more corners to go, let's get through turn 12, let's not go on the throttle too early so we end up going off the track. And now to turn 13, the season is almost over, just a couple more corners to go, just one nasty chicane to go, and then one final corner. Let's bring the NSX home, in perhaps not the most successful position, as we get a little bit sideways coming out of the chicane. Perhaps not the most successful position, but still a happy 9th place to wrap things up as we weave across the line in celebration. Having had time to reflect, despite dropping 2 places from my starting position, I was still very happy with the final result and felt as though I could not have done more. Perhaps I could have held on to 8th if I hadn't made the mistake coming out the final corner on lap 7 and picked up the half-second penalty, but even then it would have been fractional because of the relative times and pace rates of the guys behind me when I was in 7th, i.e. 8th and 9th place respectively. But still, to come home 9th is not a negative, seeing as I went into the unknown with the no-stop strategy. And in the wider context, despite this result not contributing to my final points tally for the FIA Manufacturer Series, I am pleased to say, as shown on screen right now, I finished 10th for Honda in my inaugural season and as a result became a star player. I beat my target of finishing 11th as I stated in the final race of the first stage of the season, and immediately after seeing this result pop up and signing the star player registration form, I felt extremely emotional inside. Now obviously there's the initial celebration for mine and the pride at finishing so high and finishing 351st within the Europe, Middle East and African region out of just over 40,000 entrants in my first season, so within the top 1%. But this racing has meant a lot more to me for reasons which I won't explain now, but I will cover in the future highlight reel of the full season, which I will be putting together over the next couple of weeks. Now as for future races, do I intend to take part in, say, the exhibition seasons and other seasons that do come up with GT Sport? Most definitely. I probably won't be taking part directly in the exhibition season, which starts on a Wednesday the 18th of September, because I want to break and I've currently got 2 weeks of leave planned. But still, I will be taking part in the races and I will be providing coverage in the future, I can guarantee you that. And so with that, thank you for watching. If you did enjoy this video, be sure to leave a like, comment or subscribe for future episodes. As always, I've been TX141, and until next time, take care and drive safely.